Welcome to a new Zeta report here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. We broadcast live first Mondays of every month here on Blog Talk Radio, and you can also catch us on the YouTube channel for Nancy Leader, Zeta Report. Just look up Zeta Report there, and it should be roll up for you. I'd like to welcome back to our episode Nancy from ZetaTalk.com and PullShiftNick.com. Welcome back to the show, Nancy.
Oh, we've got a good one tonight. A good one. It's beyond. Here's what you as a family or as an individual do for preparedness. It's more, what is your niche in a survivor group? You know, people tend to think of, well, you know, I don't know what I could do and how would I fit in? And, you know, well, I've got a bunch of suggestions. As a matter of fact, at least 15 different niches, and I'm eager to get started. In partnership with USA EBM, Zeta Talk and the Zeta Report will be discussing the challenges of living on a planet beset with change, rising seas, increasing earthquakes and volcanic activity, weather gone wild, and the worry of what to do next in a worst-case scenario. We will also inject Zeta Talk prophecy on what is coming next and advice on readiness plans and safe locations. Whenever Zeta Talk is quoted, please remember that prophecy is not fact. It is opinion. It only becomes fact when it happens. The Zetas are remarkably accurate but have been wrong on occasion. Please bear that in mind. For more information on this subject, visit the ZetaTalk.com website or the Zeta Report on YouTube. Questions from the chat and issues raised in the chat will be addressed toward the end of the hour after the main feature has been presented. And Andre and I want to just touch base on some of the EMP that has been going on, electromagnetic pulse. Most survival prep focuses on the individual or his family being prepared. The group or community is seldom emphasized. Yet optimal survival potentially depends on a cooperative group, sharing and working together for the common good. How does one fit into that group? It is a variety of skills as well as the determination of the group members that spells success. Let's go over some of our highly recommended survival maneuvers and see how you might fit in. As I mentioned, I have I think I counted at least 15 different niches. One of them is the hero niche, or the emergency response team niche. CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Teams. Being a first responder is definitely a niche, and not for the faint at heart either. This is hero stuff. Here in our village, the first responders go into burning buildings, give CPR, and if called upon to do so, and I have no doubt would stand staunch against a zombie apocalypse. I've seen these guys in action. I mean, just down the street, we had a house go up, and they were all in there, you know, and these are and running into burning buildings, looking for people, etc. Quoting the FEMA website, CERT, C-E-R-T, educates individuals about disaster preparedness for hazards that may impact their area and train them in basic disaster response, such as fire safety, light search and rescue, team organization, and disaster medical operations. All emergencies are local, and the CERT program helps citizens be prepared for when a disaster strikes. It is a great tool that FEMA uses to make sure that everyday citizens, those people who are the first on the scene, have the tools and skill they need to respond to a disaster. That was from the FEMA website on CERT. Our host, the USA Emergency Broadcast Network, nonprofit, has been supporting and encouraging community efforts for group survival from the start. Tim Howard, the founder of USAEBN, is a Homeland Security agent and has worked for the federal government for 20 years. USAEBN has been working with the federal CERT program in the Gila, Arizona County and received a certificate of appreciation from Gila County this past month for these efforts. He states the real reason he started USAEBN, under whose umbrella we're broadcasting tonight, but it's because he got tired of placing people in body bags. People who could have otherwise been saved had those around them had the right information. Thus, he has been personally involved in CERT in his home state of Arizona. Go first responders. And I say that from the bottom of my heart. I'm surrounded by them here in the neighborhood. We have a little village of 700 people. And if there's a house fire, if there's somebody had a heart attack, the siren goes off, these guys are there first. And they know how to do CPR, stop a hemorrhage, administer poison antidotes, whatever is required. And this is not a job. This is they don't get paid for this. It's from the heart. Okay. If
yeah, I was
that's
going to say,
not your niche, yeah.
I'm sorry,
yeah,
Nancy. I was just going to mention with the smaller towns and villages, a lot of the first responders, especially the fire departments, are almost all volunteer. So when something happens, like you drop what you're doing, you're going to be firefighter, first responder right now instead of whatever you were doing before.
Oh yes, oh yeah. I mean, somebody's life depends on that, and literally, this is the case. Literally, So anyway, that's the hero niche. If this is not your niche, how about a weed garden? Weeds are some of the most hardy plants, though they may be difficult for corporate farmers to harvest. I mean, why is it a weed and not a vegetable? There's not that much difference. Many weeds are very tasty. Maybe they don't cooperate, with now it's time to harvest, now it's time to seed or whatever, but there's not that much difference. They're full of vitamins, they're full of sugar, etc., and fiber. So anyway, you can have a weed garden because they will frequently grow in gloomy, volcanic dust, yucky situations that our normal vegetables are touchy about. They say, they don't fare well. After the pole shift, during the years when volcanic gloom may limit sunlight, they will thrive where conventional garden plants may not. I have several weeds in my garden which I treasure. I give them a spot in the garden so they can go to seed and be available, to share with neighbors when they say, I can't go to the store and buy lettuce and tomato, and I can't, and, I can give them seed from my weed garden. Purslane, high in vitamin A and a sweet-tasting succulent. Sheep sorrel, which will grow in the shade, and it's about as high as grass, but it doesn't quite look like grass, but that's sort of the shape. It can grow in the shade and is very high in vitamin C. Lamb's quarter, high in folate vitamin B9. Folate, folic acid, that'll keep your pregnancies from developing spinal bifida. Your weed garden will be a source of seed for others. Get a book. Ignore the scouring neighbors. Consider dandelion, thistle, prickly pear, and even stinging nettle. They're all very worthy. Duckweed. Most people think of a marsh as a place to go during duck hunting season, but they are so much more. Duckweed, that tiny floating plant that looks like a light green cover, looks like scum on the pond, a very light, but it's just covered with these tiny little 1 or 2 leaf plants, and they hang their little rootlets down in the water. They're 45% protein compared to soy, which is only 36% protein. One can harvest it repeatedly as it grows rapidly, grows right back. Do you or will you have a warm climate after the pole shift? You can find this out at the Zeta Talk site, where it shows you the target geography, the new geography, and where the new equator will go through the Bering Strait, down through the Pacific, right through Antarctica, and up through the Atlantic, so you can figure out what your climate's going to be pretty quick. If so, arrange fish ponds with tapetia, I always want to say tapioca, which feed on algae and duckweed. I tried to seed wild rice in the marsh next to me, but was told this did not take because we have catfish there, bottom feeders, and they uproot the plants. They root around and uproot the plants. There are lessons to be learned, so if this is your niche, Get started. Don't wait. In other words, you can stumble. You can say this is what I'm going to do, but you can't, you don't always have 100% success. You might have to step back, step to the side, reevaluate, whatever. So get going. Growing weeds or growing duckweed in your marsh, this is a great start. But get started. Don't do it this year, not next year. Mushrooms. Mushrooms have proteins and B vitamins, but they can be poisonous, as almost everyone knows. If you're an experienced mushroom picker, you can give classes or be the guru leading a picking party into the woods. If your group does not have such an expert, but you are into books, this is an ideal candidate for the community library. Speaking of a community library, this should include everything your current library does. Books on every subject. Don't forget the kids. They might not be able to get to school. The roads will be down. The bridges will be down. The teachers scattered to the wind. Who knows, But, so you're going to have to teach the kids because they might lack transport, and they lack teachers. Who knows? Math and science. I'm saving National Geographic magazines. They're wonderful. Full of pictures and full of, trip around the world on every subject. Why not? I don't toss them. I save them. First aid. Speaking of books, your group may be fortunate enough to have a doctor or nurse or a dentist or a dental hygienist. But if not, books on first aid training or what to do in the event of this or that will be highly valued. The Troubled Times books info, that's within the Zeta Talk website's Troubled Times is, so you could just type in books or one of these titles and boom, you'll be right there. On the page, Where There Is No Doctor is one. Where There Is No Dentist. Special Forces Medical Handbook. Ship's Captain Medical Guide, Emergency War Surgery, Ditch Medicine, and the Book for Midwives, a manual for traditional birth attendants and midwives. And this is just a sampling. Is this your niche? Buy those books. What I'm suggesting is not everybody is able to rush into burning buildings, and they don't have a spot for a weed garden or some such, or they don't live next to a marsh where they can encourage the duckweed or whatever to grow. But, they can buy books and get ready to contribute to the community book library. Vitamins are such an important factor in the diet. So many diseases are caused by a lack of vitamins, from soft bones in infants and toddlers, from a lack of vitamin D, to crippling spinal bifida in the newborn from lack of vitamin B9, to fatal scurvy from a lack of vitamin C, to blindness due to a lack of vitamin A. And a lot of this, when we did the vitamin segment, which I'm very proud of, I was interested to find that the wealthy classes often had vitamin deficiency diseases. They insisted on white rice, bleached flour, etc., because they thought that was hoity-toity. And if you had to eat the brown husks, well, then you were some poor bloke. Well, guess what? It was in those brown husks, all these vitamins that they needed. One of my most prized lectures was on vitamins in nature that we gave on January 4th, 2016. And that's out there on the Zeta Report on YouTube. You can look it up on my website and go down the list and click. Nature provides in the weeds and bugs that abound everywhere. Actually, weeds and bugs provide everything. There wasn't a single omission. I was amazed. If this is your niche, get educated and prepare to make your group healthy. Nothing could be more important than having vitamins, that keep you from all these deficiency diseases. How to prevent spinal bifida? Eat folic-rich weeds. They're everywhere, growing along roadsides and as opportunistic weeds in your garden. Foliate has the same root as the word foliage, and folic acid is found literally liberally in greens such as spinach and turnip greens. If you don't have a garden, don't overlook the weeds. Folate is found in all leafy greens, all. Wild greens such as dandelions, lamb's quarter, amaranth, and stinging nettle are especially rich in folate. Lamb's quarter also has triple the amount of calcium when compared to spinach. You always hear about Popeye. Ooh, look at that. Because he eats spinach. Well, you go out and eat lamb's quarters. It pops up in my garden all the time. Stinging nettle is high in iron. Stinging nettle, by the way, does not sting after cooked in the steamer. But boy, you better wear gloves when you go picking, I'm telling you. As a child, I learned that. Oh, don't touch that. It's, you get these bumps. It's like a bunch of bee stings or something, I'm telling you, for 20 minutes. So beware. Bug food, one important nutrient niche likely to be overlooked due to the yuck factor, is eating bugs and earthworms. Yet this is a significant source of protein around the world, in many cases considered a delicacy. Bugs are cheaper to raise than meat, are very high in protein and fat, and contain many essential vitamins. Your essential vitamin shield will not be complete without bugs. That's where a lot of those B vitamins are found, by the way. There's a lot of documentation on how to raise bugs on the internet. Just Google bug farms. I mean, a lot of third world countries have bug farms, and they got all the details of what to do. You can eat them grown up or as grubs or what. I mean, they lay so many eggs, because everybody eats bugs, everything else in the world, even other bugs. Bugs eat compost and even manure, so their feed is readily at hand. They will even consume roadkill, rotting meat. If you are service-oriented enough to choose this as your niche, and I say this because it's got a huge yuck factor, like, oh, I'll learn how to raise bugs. I'll start a bug farm here in my basement.
Yeah.
That'll be my niche, But it's extremely important, and because they grow in the dark, this type of thing, and they'll eat just about anything. Just remember that lobster, shrimp, and crabs are bugs. That's a fact. They're bugs.
Right.
So, oh, yummy, we're going to have lobster or shrimp. Well, you're eating bugs. So if you just kind of keep that in mind, because it is kind of like,
right.
Oh, no.
Well,
Earthworms
the lobster,
are another...
isn't that
Huh?
the lobster, I can, being in the food industry and for many years, we used, have different nicknames for things, but lobster, generally speaking, is the cockroach of the sea. It's just a much bigger cockroach, and it lives in seawater. But it's on the bottom.
Yeah.
It's eating leftovers and rotting stuff, and then it's steamed and put in butter, and it's delicious.
Oh yeah, it's it just goes to show you, it's all in the attitude, But third world countries eat bugs like crazy, and they consider them a delicacy,
right.
But it is something that normal Western culture says, oh, no, I can't, oh. Anyway, earthworms are another source of protein. Likewise, eating compost and manure. They eat, they turn over a cow patty, and there are the earthworms. They are 82% protein, with omega-3 as the essential oil. That's fish oil. That's what the doctor gives you to, keep your cholesterol down. We had earthworm beds here at my home 15 years ago during the hydroponic lab times in my basement. We learned a lot, which is why starting now and not waiting is important. That learning curve is something you want to put behind you. You will make mistakes. You will stumble and get up and move forward, and it's important to consider that you have to allow yourself this learning curve. Red wigglers are the best, as those big fat night crawlers just will not domesticate. I tried. They all died. And then I learned you have to have red wigglers. Just give them a pile of garden compost to nestle into, and they get right to work making soil and propagating. You do not have to give them soil. You just have the ground up compost and toss in the worms, and that's it. You want to keep it moist, not let it dry out, and they'll just keep propagating. Remove the egg casts regularly as they act as a natural contraceptive for the worms. Too many around, not enough to eat, and they would all starve. So they stop having babies. In other words, if there's too many egg casts, they say, we're overcrowded, stop, reproducing. So take those egg casts out. And they are, by the way, the best fertilizer in the world. Dissolve them in water, and they will even grow hydroponic gardens. How do I know? We did that in the basement. We did a 3-way test. It was commercial hydroponic fluid, worm fluid, and from the fish tanks where we had fish, because they poop in the water, etc. Well, the hydroponic solution that you buy in stores and from our worm beds, it was equivalent. And I counted leaves, counted blossoms, counted everything. Equivalent. Now, the fish water didn't do as well. That was much less productive. But it did grow beans and stuff like that too. Anyway, the worm beds will also create soil. You end up with soil at the very bottom, which you can then put back into your gardens, very rich in nutrients, etc. And the bonus is that earthworm beds are quiet, and the herd never stampedes. Now, this is something you want to get going on. If this is a niche, and you can be in the city, you can go out to the farms or wherever and get a bunch of green compost and have your worm bed. I know people that have a drawer in the kitchen where they keep their worm bed. You want to have this handy because when push comes to shove, you can't say, "Oh, it's time for us to order some red wigglers from, the internet or what. The internet's down and nobody's responding or mailing anything out. Too late." So get going ahead of time. Get a niche. This is an important, valuable niche. You will be welcomed into any survival community. Chickens. If one has a suburban or rural setting, starting a brood of chickens is an ideal niche. Once again, a learning curve should be anticipated. It's more than just purchasing a bunch of chicks, and yes, they come in a box, and you can mail them. You go to the post office and you hear beep, 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 beep. Oh, there's little chicks in that box with holes punched so they can breathe. Yet you have to right away get them to water because they learn to drink water by watching Mama. Mama goes and puts her beak in the water, and the little ones follow suit. If they don't have a mama and you've just got little baby chicks, pick them up, put their little beaks in the water because they will not learn to drink, and they will die of thirst sitting right next to the water bowl. Yes, indeed. Okay. They need sunlight also. I learned that. We had them in my basement down here, and we had a broken leg because I noticed that the farmers in the area with flocks, the hobby farmers, they'll let their chicks out to run, even in winter, get some sunlight, and then back into the coop. Give them the shells back for their calcium. You can free-range chickens, and they search for bugs and worms. They're omnivores and will eat almost anything. I was stunned by that. We gave them melon rinds, and they just about ate them down to nothing. I thought, eating melon rinds? Who would have thought? But they do. They're omnivores. A single brooder hen usually emerges in the flock and will sit on all the eggs. All the hens end up laying their eggs in that one nest, and here comes the brooder, and she sits there and plucks out all the feathers from her tummy, so she can keep all the little eggs warm, and she hatches the eggs for the whole flock, And yes, you have to have a rooster or you're not going to get baby chicks. They lay eggs all the time.
Right.
But at certain times of the year, the eggs become fertile, and now you've got the brooder, and now chip chip chip, here the little ones come out. Anyway, the roosters are also defending the flock from predators, and they consider you a predator. I found that one of our little roosters that we hand raised, was very friendly, and I think he thought of himself as a human, and he didn't attack. But the others that weren't quite so hand raised. Oh man, and they get up and they fly at your kneecap, with their little claws, and you want to die. I would go in there with a garbage pail lid, as like a shield. So
Yeah.
you have to learn the ins and outs. You can't just say I've got a box of chicks and everything's fine. You gotta, there's a learning curve here. Donkeys, if you're lucky enough to be in a rural area on the fringes of a suburban area that allows you to have a hobby farm, then you can have donkeys too. You can have more than chickens, you can have donkeys. And some of our hobby farms around here do. These little burros are loyal and protective, and they take on cougars or coyotes or snakes. They mix in with a herd of sheep or goats. It's amazing, but they do. They're fearless, and for whatever reason, they hate snakes. They hate you don't get that from horses. Horses run away. But donkeys and I think mules, which are like a cross between a horse and a donkey, they have some of that donkey characteristic and will take on, and be a protector of the herd. Geese are another protector of the farm and loudly announce any approach. You need an alarm system? Get geese. If you're lucky enough to be able to keep these critters, this is your niche. What I'm telling you is, when push comes to shove, and we have the passage of Nibiru, the predicted passage of Nibiru, that Zeta Talk and lots of other places are talking about. Zacharias Sitchin had the ancient Sumerians talk about it every 3,600 years, yada yada. Anyway, and you have a mess on your hand. There's going to be a lot of niches, but if you come armed with donkeys and chickens and goats, that type of thing, because you happen to be on the fringes of suburbia and you happen to let them live there, hey, you got an in, you got a niche, and there you are. A step up from chickens are goats. They are more difficult to keep, being larger and very agile. But the big advantage is that they produce an excellent milk, which can make a superlative cheese, and they are also a source of meat. Goats do not need to be herded. They bond and will follow their herdsmen around. They eat anything, including poison ivy. I've been told this. Their manure is like pellets, not sloppy, so easily collected and transported. They are jumpers and climbers and hard to corral thus. I guess you have to have fences like 20 feet high or something. I'm not sure how high, but I've been told they get up on top of their little houses and go boing, and they're out of their fenced enclosure. I've been told that they are affectionate and give a type of hug. I've also been told that if they have twins, they might abandon one kid, and it's usually the little girl kid. Then, if you know that they had twins and now mama shows up with just one of the kids, you got to go out in the woods or something like that and find the other kid, who's left under a bush or something. So that can happen. If living in cities, those people living in cities should take a page from Growing Power. And people say, well, what can I do? I have a brownstone. It's just my street is a wall of housing, and nobody even has a yard. What are you going to do? Well, Growing Power went into inner city areas, the slum areas, and imported. They not only imported some, they grow their own dirt with worm beds, and they grow produce for sale into the local stores. And it is such a successful combination. This guy is doing everything right. And he's a consultant. He's won awards. This developed in Milwaukee, and various other cities like Chicago and I don't know what all cities, have followed suit. So you can do this even if you're living in a city. You can have a thriving vegetable enterprise, and if you get going, now you have seed, you have soil, and if everything falls down around you, what do you care? You've got your vegetable garden, etc. The CEO of Growing Power is a consultant and award winner, populating this award-winning concept to a number of cities. His methods are tried and true, not secret, not theoretical. So if this is your niche, jump in. City gardening, and this is something that Andre can talk to. If you lack a plot of land, Take to the rooftops on top of buildings. If you live in a condo on a high-rise, do container gardening on your porch. Many cities provide community garden plots where produce can be shared in the combined compost pile, building highly fertile soil. If you have gardening skills idle from years of city living, this may be your niche. You know, get out your garden tools or go get some and jump in. Now, you personally work with community gardens, don't you, Andre?
Yeah, I'm here in Madison, Wisconsin. I have been for several years. Well, I grew up. The history behind it is I grew up on a small farm, not a commercial farm by any stretch of the imagination, but like a hobby farm when I was a young person, and I've got most of those skills for gardening. The only problem is that I live in the city. I live in a condo, so I don't have land to do such gardening on. So one great option for a lot of folks out there, and you can look this up in your local community, is a community garden, and they're usually relatively inexpensive to rent. You rent it around here. We rent it for the season because in the wintertime there's nothing you can do there. I mean, nothing grows. So it's just for most of the summer, spring, and then part of the fall that you use it. But I've got a 20-foot by 20-foot plot that I've had for about 4 years here in Madison, and it really delivers. And you're talking about that learning curve, Nancy, when we're going through these different niches and talking about the different things that you can do to survive. And it's really true. It's like, I've had all these skills of what I thought were skills in my head all my life, and then you go and you start digging the dirt, and it's all clay, or it's all weeds, or it's rocky, and then you plant your seeds, and you find out that you've got deer, and the deer eat everything. So those mistakes that you make are part of the learning curve, and that learning curve makes you an expert at what you're doing. And like I said, the community garden situation that we have here in Madison is excellent. There's several different places around the city. Our spot has about 20 to 25 plots. So sometimes there's a waiting list. A lot of people are getting into this with, getting ahead with, and you always know where your food comes from too, because you know where you got the seed, you know where it grows, and what goes into the dirt. You're providing your own water to it, so you don't have to worry about whatever chemicals in the water or fertilizers or pesticides. So you really have control about what you're growing and what you're feeding your family, and also saving those seeds at the end too is very important, because it doesn't grow from nothing, especially in the wintertime. If you don't have perennials, you're going to have to plant seed every year. So save that seed. Big important step.
That's right. That jumps right into my next niche, which is seed saving, because he who has a lot of seed and a variety of seed and knows how to save it and knows how to dry it and save it and et cetera and keep it fertile is going to be elevated to God status. The main benefit of jumping into gardening without delay is the ability to have fresh seed. Those who have never gardened assume being prepared for the future means buying a bunch of seed packets and then feeling smug. It is so much more. In a global catastrophe, distribution of all goods will come to a halt, and the shelves in the stores will be bare. But if you and others in your group are growing and saving seed, you can share with other survivor groups, and boy, will you be appreciated. Seed is easiest to save from annual plants that mature to seed in a year, and that is all that's required is to store the seed in a dry place. This is true for corn, beans, okra, mustard, radish, dill, parsley, spinach. You let the plant dry, and you shuck the seed off and put it in a Ziploc and tuck it away out of the light, and there you are. Some seed, like lettuce and amaranth, must be collected regularly as it matures, and then it flies away or drops if not collected. Lettuce does that. I went out every day and pluck, pluck, pluck. And then the next day, I'd have more little seeds ready to fly away. So it doesn't mature all at once like a cob of corn would, for instance. Some seed is messy to collect, requiring an overripe fruit and some moldering to prepare the seed. This includes, in moldering, gets rid of the slime surrounding the seed, and the seed then is aware that it is no longer in a moldering thing. You know, it's the next year. It's gone through a winter, a lot of rain. Now it's the next spring. I mean, there's some sort of like an internal clock that the seed uses. So if it doesn't molder, it's not going to sprout. Tomato, peppers, melons, eggplant, squash, and pumpkin all have some of this. Overripe fruit, then you rinse off the seed and dry it and put it away for the next year, and then it'll go crazy. Certain plants require special handling. Potatoes are propagated by cuttings. Garlic has been cultivated so long it no longer goes to seed, so cloves from a root cluster are required for propagation. Cabbage, onions, and carrots are examples of biennial plants that will only go to seed in their second year. This means you must, if you're in a warm climate, cover them over for the winter, or if not in a warm climate, use a root cellar or to keep them from freezing hard. Remember that potatoes and tomatoes are members of the nightshade family, so the greens from these plants should not be fed to livestock. Compost the greens instead. So there's all this stuff to learn. It's not like, I'll just go out with a little baggie and click, 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 and then I've got, oh no. And I went through all this, to learn it. And so I'm speaking from experience. There is a learning curve. Jump in. Get that behind you. If you like berries, then a strawberry patch is a wonderful niche. You can grow strawberries indoors, and when your survival community is hungry for berries, you can give them the runners that spring forth from mature plants. Strawberries do not really go to seed. They look like they're covered with seed, but I'm not sure how successful that is. Everybody does it from runners because all adult strawberry plants go, all these springy things come out. There's a little plant at the end, and then it gets roots and snuggles into some place, and that's how they grow, through the runners. And that's how they're commercially grown, too. Local raspberry plants must propagate from seed dropped in bird poop, so look for the baby plants nearby. Grapevines via cuttings. I've done that with our Concord grapevine here. Prepare, if you can, to be the source for these delightful fruits in the future, if this is your niche. And I'm just naming a few here. But, fruits are different than vegetables, and highly treasured. Although, technically, I guess tomatoes are fruits. Are you a good cook? Like to invent new recipes? This is a very important niche. Make duckweed and mashed grubs tasty. Make fake omelets from mashed grubs. We ate earthworm recipes in 2001, created by a sushi chef, Ichi, who was here from Japan for this purpose. The best was a chicken soup, which had pieces of earthworms floating around, no chicken. It did indeed taste like chicken, I can attest. So, to be able to make things taste good, so people don't say, this is like cardboard or whatever. This is a real talent, to grow the right kind of spices or have a knack for this. And the Zetas even say that. And I quote Zeta Talk. Good cooks, skilled at making the plain fare tasty, will be much appreciated. And they're talking about survival camps in the aftertime, how important something like music is. And they threw in tasty food, which is very important. If one is forced to a vegetarian diet, the key is to use lysine-heavy grains. Buckwheat, soy, peas, legumes, and amaranth are the highest. Corn and amaranth together are the equivalent of red meat in protein. No kidding. Powder made from dried bugs or worms could be used in soups to thicken the soup. Opportunities await. This is a good, a lot of women say, well, I've got 7 kids, and all I do is house clean and take, and try to get a meal on the table, and then I'm exhausted. And What can I do? Well, if you're a good cook, get experimental. Line this up. Practice with some of this stuff. This is your niche. I mean, you can do this day in and day out. And when it comes to, a pole shift or some horrible cataclysm and the bridges are down, the grid is down, everybody's wailing and running around, you can say, soup's on. And you'll know what to do. All right, fibers. A seldom named niche considered when long-term survival is discussed is manufacturing clothing. The emphasis is instead on batteries and freeze-dried foods. But clothing wears out, children grow, and mending with patches only goes so far. Clothing can be developed from cotton, wool, or linen fibers. The fibers are combed and then twisted into threads. Linen stalks are soaked to remove all but the long fibers. Cotton and wool are carded between two brushes, pulled in different directions. Then they're spun on a spinning wheel or distaff to put a twist into the threads. Spinning wheels can be purchased as this is a popular hobby, and I can tell you it's fun and relaxing. How do I know? My mother, bless her heart, made sure I had spinning lessons as a child. She also made sure I learned how to weave cloth on a loom. Both spinning wheels and looms are simple designs, which I have provided on the Trouble Times page, which I host on my Zeta Talk websites. And just exactly what all the components are. Any carpenter can look at those drawings and say, oh, I can do that. You can too. If making clothing is your niche, you can partner with a carpenter in your survival group and manufacture these items. Spinning and weaving by the fireside is a time-honored occupation for rainy or cold days. Manual sewing machines can likewise be purchased new or used. And an easy way to get a pattern when the pattern shops are gone or inaccessible is to take apart an old used garment. Take it apart at the seams, lay the pieces out on a table. Hey, that's your pattern. Then pin that to some new cloth, etc., and away you go. Knitting. Wool is most often twisted into yarn and then knitted into clothing such as scarves, blankets, hats, and sweaters. Knitting needles are nothing more than long sticks which adroitly interconnect a long, long section of yarn. Many patterns for booties or mittens exist, or an experienced knitter, perhaps, too old to garden or chase chickens anymore, can teach others. This is a perfect niche for an elder. Hand tools. If carpentry is your niche, plan to bring, after losing the grid and not having any electric tools, plan to use hand tools. These can be found in barn and garage sales and also purchased new. Seriously, they can be purchased new. Even the venerable crosscut saw, which people saw up big fat tree trunks with, can be purchased brand new. If you become a proficient before disaster strikes, you will be much in demand. In the days before electricity, hand tools were used to build houses, construct furniture, and to make carts and wagons. My father designed and built furniture in the basement as a hobby to relax, making his own patterns and selecting the hardwoods to be used. I would go down and help him. And he'd have me do things like huff on the sawdust in front of the saw or whatever. That was, how can I help? How kids are. And I'd be 5 years old or whatever. So anyway, he did a lot of beautiful pieces of furniture. If this is your niche, revel in it, because, people get tired of sitting on the ground. Houseboats. Into water sports? Consider becoming a houseboat specialist. Rising water will be a problem for most of the world, and the need to switch from a home on stilts to a houseboat will become a reality for many. There are houseboat designs available where one can build their own pontoons, but any airtight container will work. And if you understand what goes on and what the techniques are. I was thinking the other day about, you'd have to make sure that if the water was a little wavy or windy, that you just didn't tip over. And there's probably something that you can dangle down at the center, which ensures, that the houseboat isn't going to tip and tilt. These are things you just don't know, by instinct. You have to have a little practice with it. Try your hand at this and be known among your likely survivor group partners for this specialty. You will never be alone. Houseboats can be constructed from all the trash that will be laying around. Be resourceful. Have fun. There's one houseboat that I have a photo of that it really looks like, Huckleberry Finn might have put that together to go down the Mississippi. And it's just a bunch of trash, and he's got a sail up there. Why not? If it works, that's what counts. Electricians have a ready-made niche, as when the grid goes down, everyone will be looking for the lights to come back on. Wind or water mills, along with the alternatives found in every, along with the alternators found in every car or electric tools such as drills, will generate electricity, as well as a bike gen. And the alternators are basically something spins round and round, electromagnetic, and out of the wires comes a flow of electricity. That's what an alternator does. Every car has them, every electric drill has them, etc. They're in abundance. And then what you need is something that will cause the spinning around, windmill, water mill, or pumping away on a bike. Windmills don't have to be fancy or tall. The flaps of a Nebraska windmill are at ground level, and the Savanius wind spins at the slightest breeze, just like a child's pinwheel toy. If your group has an experienced ham radio enthusiast, you are in luck. Shortwave is the emergency frequency of choice around the world. Our village has a tower for this very purpose on the block that I live on. Shortwave communications moves from local tower to local tower and can even use the moon for a bounce, I am told, moon bounce. This is a popular hobby, and enthusiasts have the transmitter, mics, towers, and batteries as part of the package. I had a guest when the Troubled Times projects were in process at my home here, and he put a tower up by tossing a wire into a tree. He flung it up there with a fishing rod, and had the wire attached, and he went fwing, and up it went, and then what would be normally the fishing line was his wire coming down into his shortwave equipment. And there you were. Now we had a tall tower. Shortwave can have a long reach, and I can attest to this. Decades ago, using an old Telefunken radio, we reached South Africa from Wisconsin. This was at least 50 years ago. If you can see this is your niche, there are books aplenty available. But if you have a shortwave guy in your group, they come with all the equipment. They come with all the knowledge and equipment, and they can teach you. That's the end of my lecture on niches, Andre, and we also wanted to talk about EMP, didn't we?
Right. We concentrated a lot on our last episode, our last Zeta report. We talked about the magnetosphere and the scrambling of that, and at this point, I've been following that quite closely, and it's nothing to do with the sun. The sun's not doing anything. So anybody who's watching the magnetosphere or solar wind speeds or electrons coming in, we had a big electron smash the other day, it's not coming from the sun. What's going on out there? We get EMPs and zapping people and all kinds of stuff.
It's Nibiru. That's what I think for sure, because it has a charged tail, a lot of debris coming down. And just since last month, when I think we did go over all this, there was a guy that got burned up with a cell phone. He had the charger in bed with him, and his cell phone plugged in, and he had a metal earring in one ear, and he got third-degree burns on his neck. and you should see his ears like swollen completely shut, Anyway, he received 110 volts. It only takes 100 volts to kill a man. Everybody said he was really lucky. Well, how did that happen? The cell phone charger just decided to, ramp up and electrocute him. So cell phone chargers are sensitive because I think last month I talked about my friend in Maine, and he and his wife were charging their phones side by side, and they were calling each other and recording messages from each other. Well, so cell phone chargers are sensitive, Then there was March 27th, there was a Hong Kong elevator, and it was the upward bound escalator suddenly reversed and spilled dozens of people onto the mall floor below. Many, many injuries. There was no explanation, and we never got an explanation why that did that. But it went berserk, and all this software running cars, etc. Yeah, this is scary business. On April 9th in Dallas, Texas, we had 156 sirens blaring simultaneously and repeatedly for hours. Officially, this all stemmed from a hub which controlled all of them. And for like 4 hours, they were trying to get these sirens kept going off, and they would try to turn them off, and then they go off again. The news stated that the incident required manual or physical entry into the hub. Yet they didn't call the police. That was not called. They were not called in as part of the investigating group. Well, they said it had to be local because it had to be this hub where this happened. Well, then why did they not call the police? Aren't you looking for fingerprints? They knew it wasn't that somebody broke in, So they were aware, apparently, also, that it didn't happen because of any kind of radio or telephone nudging of this hub, because they had a record of what kind of phone calls went in there, etc. So the hub got blasted with EMP, and all the sirens went off, like, whoop, whoop, we're having tornadoes. So on April 21st, the U.S. had coast-to-coast blackouts. The most severe was in San Francisco at 9:20 a.m. Pacific time. San Francisco is surrounded on three sides by water. Anyone who's been there knows. You got the bay on the inside and the Pacific on the outside, and Golden Gate Bridge just to the north, etc. EMP loves water, and there it was, surrounded by water. This was preceded on that same day by electrical problems in New York City at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time, and several subway systems failed to operate. New York City, particularly Manhattan Island, where this occurred, is, of course, surrounded by water. On the same day, just after the San Francisco blackout, there was an outage in Los Angeles, and the PG&E outage map shows that Portland, Oregon also was affected. So coast to coast, blackouts and etc. on that particular day. The San Francisco outage was blamed on a single substation. But if you look at the map, there's multiple substations, but the point is, the map looks like measles. There's blotches. Here's where there was an outage, surrounded by stuff where there wasn't an outage. But if that substation failed, you would have the whole area be out, not measles. So it was obvious that was, they throw out some excuse. They have to say something, right? This is characteristic of EMP, not a cutoff at a substation. The blotches are how EMP works. Quoting the SanFranciscoGate.com news. A huge blackout bringing everyday life to a virtual standstill as homes and businesses and courtrooms went dark. Traffic lights stopped working, BART and Mooney service slowed, and all the cable cars shut down. The power failure struck just after 9 a.m. and extended through the Tenderloin and Chinatown, up Nob Hill and into the Marina and Presidio. But you got to see the map to understand how blotchy it was. New York City, characteristic for EMP caused by Nibiru, it moves with the sun, rises with the sun, and is gone by nightfall, because Nibiru is passing the sun, and it can usually be seen at the 4 o'clock position in the northern hemisphere if you look at the sun. Okay. New York City had their transit problems at 7:30 Eastern Time, but San Francisco did not start until 9:30 Pacific Time. No cause for the New York City outage was ever reported, at least not that day. Quoting ABC, service was completely halted on the B, C, and M lines. Con Edison and transit crews are working to determine what triggered the hours-long outage that affected the signals, which began around 7:30 a.m. Con Edison first investigated the power at West 42nd Street and 6th, but did not find any problems there. Well, EMP comes and goes, and after it goes, it leaves no traces. There you are. They tried to blame the sun. The establishment quickly tried to blame the sun, but as usual in these events, their predictions came late, after the incident. In other words, this is characteristic. They say, "Oh, wait a minute, we had weird stuff going on with the sun." That explains it, but where were they in warning ahead of time? They don't. The EMP in the U.S. happened early on the days of April 21st, and the NOAA charts showed no warning until later that day. They started to say, well, we think we might have something on the 23rd, but then it hits on the 21st. Well, because they can't predict the EMP in the charged tail from Nibiru. They're not that good at it, and they try, but they swing and they miss. NOAA can tweak the data afterwards to meet their needs, which they do. Afterwards, they say, "Oh, it was the sun. We had a coronal hole or whatever." So, quoting a Godlike Production forum, conspiracy forum, they got some really sharp people there, and they look at this stuff, and here's what a guy said. Is anyone asking why NOAA and Space Weather Prediction Center is being forced to come up with an explanation after the fact for an unforecast 18-hour-long and counting G2 storm with some magnometers measuring up to a G4 with winds at 700 km per second from our sun? According to NOAA, the coronal hole stream isn't forecast to reach Earth for another 2 days until April 23rd. No explanation for the current storming and 650 kilometer per second winds. In other words, this guy is not being fooled by this. Oh, it's the sun. Gotham Shield was another excuse. Remember when they had the exercise Gotham Shield in New York? The outage had been a hacking job. That's what they were trying to say. Hackers did it. Despite the logistics of the outage being done by hacking not fitting, it doesn't connect right. This is not controlled by software, etc. But they said, how can it be a hack? Some alternative news sites tried to link the New York City outage to a planned exercise called Gotham Shield, but this was not scheduled to take place until April 24th. Quoting the DailyWesterner.com site, all of this is coinciding with the Operation Gotham Shield drill being held in the New York City area. Depending on who you ask, it's even going on right now. But again, we civilians, read peons, are being mostly kept in the dark about the huge drill. One set of dates says the drill started on April 18th and will run through May 5th. Another set of dates says the actual nuke EMP simulation part won't happen until April 24th to the 26th. Well, in any case, it wasn't Gotham Shield. It wasn't man-made. Man didn't do it. And it wasn't the sun. But they're giving you these excuses because we are yet to hear from the establishment, oh, by the way, Nibiru is real, and it's there, and it's coming through, and it's going to make a passage, and oh boy, that's going to be messy. You hear it here, guys, but you don't hear it from the establishment. So Put two and two together and find your niche. You don't have to be a farmer. You don't have to be living on an Amish farm, with all those horses and you don't have to have windmills and all that. There are lots of niches. I think I counted like 15 as I was rattling them off. and I'm sure I don't have them all. Find a niche, something that you can do readily, that you already are experienced at. Develop that, get the supplies, get practiced, get everything going, and then when you come together in a survival community, boy, you'll be cooking. You won't miss your vitamins, you won't miss your lysine-rich food. You'll have your clothing repaired, etc., etc., and a terrific chef making everything tasty. And that's the end of everything I had prepared for tonight. Guess what? My clock says 6 o'clock on the button.
Nice. Good work. Yeah, you're totally bringing back some memories of earlier episodes that we've done on the Zeta Report here on USA EBN with the Vitamin 1. It's a good shout out for that. That's January 4th, 2016, if you're looking it up on the YouTube. But as you're scrolling through if you're on the YouTube Nancy Leader Zeta Report, you can also see the other episodes that we've done where we talk about, the wealthy and they're building up bunkers. That's hitting in the news again, Nancy. I don't know if you've noticed. Everybody's building a bunker now. It's the coolest thing. Yeah. But what we've done here at USA Emergency Broadcasting Network is we're setting the example of what you can do and some options out there. Not, like you said, not everybody's going to be an expert at knitting or weaving or firefighting or fishing. But if you have a group that is well diversified with skills, that each person is going to be able to contribute to the whole of the group, the success of the group. So when you're doing these things and looking at different options, if it resonates with you, if it's something that, hey, I could do that, hey, that would be a lot of fun. If that's something that's your niche, start learning now. And we're saying that because we don't give out dates about pole shift or the passage of Nibiru because we don't know. It's depending on the Earth and what's going on in space and different sorts of factors. But what we do know is practice is better to do before you're at the big game than, you know what I mean? It's better to practice now than it is to go in there and say, oh, what's the play again? Where do I get my seeds? If you're more comfortable with it, you're going to be doing a better job. You'll do a better job if you're more comfortable with the subject. So that's why we're here putting it out there now.
Right. I can't think of anything that I have been privileged to familiarize myself, saving seed, raising vegetables, the earthworm beds, the fish tanks, hand tools. My grandfather has hand tools that are still around. All of these things. There was such a learning curve, It wasn't 100%, I don't know, 27% or whatever. You fail. You learn from your failures. And then you pick up and now you've got it right. But you have to allow for that. So don't wait. Get going. Plunge in.
Exactly. Jump in. Both feet.
Yeah.
Make mistakes. Make them now while you can afford to make mistakes.
Yep, because you will. It'll happen. Yes, indeed. Yeah. And there were a lot of niches that we didn't mention. Oh, pardon me. I was going to say.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Making music is another one. Being a musician, this kind of thing is important to be able to. And everybody's sitting around there glum. You can get a little campfire going, but as anyone who's gone camping knows, to have sing-alongs and that type of thing, it lifts the spirits. So I'm sure, even though I rattled them off, you could probably name just as many, that come to mind. Find your niche and develop it, and be ready to go.
Exactly. Then that will be part of the success of you and for your group as well. So everybody will have their own niche, and not everybody can be firefighter. Sorry.
That's right. Thank God. I don't run so good anymore. Right.
Yeah. Let's not start the house on fire. Well, I also wanted to mention, though, Nancy, too, that on poleshift.ning.com, the sister site to Zeta Talk, there's different areas that you can go into to find this information. If you go on to the poleshift.ning site, not sure on the new setup, but you can always use the search bar to look up seed saving or look up chickens. Just those keywords will give you some ideas. It's a search of all the archive of Zeta Talk and poleshift.ning.com. So it's nice to go in there. And then there's also blogs on that site as well that talk about a lot of those things. But that's a great resource as well.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. Amen.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time again, Nancy.